That's all we have time for questions. We will have a closing statement from each, and then a brief announcement, and we'll close. For the first closing statement, Ms. Dan Barker, please keep it to 3 minutes if you can.
I think John's biggest blunder tonight was the sentence that existence is a non-essential feature. Existence is not a feature, it is not a characteristic. He's playing with words. Theologians like to do that. Christian apologists like to equivocate. They like to pretend that in the ontological argument, Anselm did the same thing. Anselm, who said that a being who exists is greater than a being who's just in conception, as if existence were somehow a characteristic of something that already exists. That's gobbledygook. That is nonsense. It's an argument that has no meaning to it at all. Again, John is confusing God of the gap explanations for evidence. It is not evidence. Was the thunder and lightning evidence for Thor? Was that plastic bottle evidence for unicorns? Obviously not. To posit some kind of an explanation for the existence of these things is simply a positing, and is not evidence itself. It is trying to argue. You're trying to take a gap in our understanding and plug it with your theory, with your hypothesis, which you can't even define. You can't tell us what it's made of. You can't tell us what it's what would be how would you know that it doesn't exist? What sentence could you possibly say about your God which, if true, would make your claim that he exists untrue? How would you falsify such a claim? And if you can't, in principle, create a falsifiable statement, then you're not even arguing for anything that we can talk about. We're not sinking our teeth into anything. I do want to close with just a tiny little atheist sermon. If life is eternal, then life is cheap. We give greater value to things that are rare, things that are precious, rare metals and precious. We mourn the death of old people, but when a young child dies, whoa, we think it's a greater loss. We atheists and agnostics know that this life is all there is. This is all we have. And because of that, our life is enhanced to a much greater degree. Our appreciation, our enjoyment, our respect for that life is enhanced. I have not heard any evidence for a God. I haven't heard any good arguments for a God. I've heard a lot of words. I've heard some equivocations. I've heard some bad definitions. So in my mind, why believe in something that is so irrational and delusional? Why not spend our energy and our time not giving money and time and energy to some church or some religion, but actually doing real good in the real world? There's no purpose of life. That's the truly good news. If there were a purpose of life, that would cheapen life as well. As long as there are problems to solve, and the truly moral issues that we're struggling with, and solving the real problems of society and the world, hunger and inequality and oppression and you name it, as long as there are those problems to solve, there is immense purpose in life. So we atheists and agnostics reject the notion of this creator God, but we heartily embrace morality, goodness, beauty, and purpose. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm very happy with the way tonight's debate has gone. Dan kind of ended by accusing me of playing with words, which I think you'll find an argument is usually something your opponent does when he can't find a flaw in your argument, but he doesn't like the conclusion. Dan asked, what would falsify my belief in God? I'll tell you, based on the three proofs again, which were barely touched upon. The first proof means that if no reality existed, if nothing in the world, if the natural world didn't exist, I might lose my belief in God. If someone could prove to me that nothing was right and wrong, I might lose my belief in God. If someone, based on the third proof, could show that illogicity was possible, if someone could show me a round square, I might lose my faith in God. That shows how difficult your case is and how strong mine is. I'd like to end with this. There's been a lot of citation from the Bible tonight, so maybe I'll be excused one citation, which is from the second chapter of the book of Jeremiah, where there's a complaint made against those pagans who say to a piece of wood, "You are my father," and who say to a rock, "You gave birth to me." And of course, that's a very irrational, very primitive, very superstitious worldview. But what's interesting to me is that the pseudo-scientific atheism that Dan represents tonight is superstitious and irrational for precisely the same reason. In fact, the only thing that's changed is that the idols have gotten smaller. Instead of saying to a piece of wood, "You are my father," they say it to the molecular life forms of the world. Instead of saying to a rock, "You brought me into the world, you gave birth to me," they say that to the inanimate, unintelligent subatomic particles. And while that view of things may have grown more sophisticated, may have grown more complex, and I think it's certainly grown more dogmatic and more evangelical, the one thing it can never become and will never become is any more rational. Thanks so much, and God bless.
Outstanding, outstanding. You actually have access to these speakers later tonight. It doesn't have to end here. If you'd like to join John Mark tonight at 7:30 in the Burge Union, St. Lawrence will be putting on The Genius of Women, the other Catholic group here. So if you're going there, that's why we will end promptly to allow you to attend that. Immediately after this, Dan Barker will be joining us for a book signing in the Governor's Room, where you can also purchase his book and the books of other speakers that are part of Reason Fest, as well as get free materials from Soma. That's right, there are more speakers for Reason Fest. We continue tomorrow with Day 2. We will start with a psychological look at sex and secularism and continue with speakers talking about things like paranormal investigations, naturalism, and the Day of Prayer. There are many people to thank, but this event couldn't have happened without our sponsors, the Center for Inquiry, and especially the Secular Student Alliance, for giving us a grant to help put on this event. I'd also like to thank you as an audience. Your enthusiasm is contagious, and it gave energy to the auditorium. You are incredible. And I also want to thank you for demonstrating your passion for truth by attending here today. And lastly, to our speakers, who gave up their resources and their time to join us and to present this debate for you. Let's give them one last round of applause.